As we said, 1912, Wilfred Voynich purchases the book. We don't know where he gets it from, or I don't know. I know he purchased it, but I don't remember exactly where he got it.
I believe he bought it in Italy.
Did he?
Yeah.
I'll run with that. He, I believe, willed it to his wife, Ethel, who then gave it to a woman named Anne Nill, who then sold it in 1961 to a man by the name of H.P. Krauss. In 1969, Krauss donated it to Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library.
So Yale has it.
So Yale has it
Still?
today.
For now.
Okay.
They still have it today.
Yeah, for now.
Yeah. So that's where it is. That's where they've done a great job of getting good photos of it and making it available to everybody. But it's a several-year-old, 100-year-old text, so we don't want everybody leafing through it constantly.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's under lock
But it
and
is.
key.
But I think it is available if you go in and you're a researcher of any kind. I know they've made it available to certain forensic scientists.
They have. You've got to have the credentials to
I would
prove that you can get to it. You and I couldn't just walk in there and ask.
We have the credentials. What are you
Yeah, I
talking
think it's
about?
silent. But the thing about it is I've looked at their photographs of the book online, and it's very clear, and it's you can
They're
zoom in.
really great.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
high quality.
You can zoom in.
They've done a really good
look at
job.
high detail and everything. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked about the history that we think we know.
That we're fairly sure.
We're fairly sure of. People believe they figured it out. Folks have tried to pinpoint where it might have and when it might have been made. And some of that they've done based on characteristics that are in the text itself. Let me just run through some of that. So it has what they refer to as a upright handwriting style that's reminiscent of Carolinian minuscule, which evidently was in use from 800 to 1200. Or it's there's another. It's Italian. How do you say that, Joe?
Quattrocento.
Okay, which I guess is called the humanist hand, which was from 14 to 1500. And the carbon dating kind of puts it in that range as well. People have also said that the drawings have parallel hatching, and hatching is when you draw a series of lines to infer shading, which is similar to, one of the first guys that really did a lot of that is Da Vinci. If you look at a lot of old drawings, that's how he gave depth and shadow as you cross-hatch in there.
Yeah.
So people think that it could have been from his era, which would have been, if it was made in Germany or that style came out, it would have been in Germany at around 1410. If it was made in Florence, it would have been 1440, or if it was after 1450, then it could have been anywhere because that style had gone across Europe.
It had gone viral.
Yes.
Yeah. But so that's a pretty good, solid, 60 or 70-year-old window, right?
Yeah, for the cross-hatching, yes.
Yeah.
And for that kind of matches with the hand style.
For the Italian,
style?
for the Italian handwriting style, yes, it does.
Okay.
But we've also got some things. Some people who have owned the book have made notes on it and in the margin, and that handwriting seems to be done in the style of the 15th century. So we're looking at the 1400s. And there's some of the other notes that are written on it, and this is primarily notes that are in the Zodiac section. That style of handwriting people have pointed to say is from the southwest of France. So there's a lot of different places that it could have been just based on these basic facts. So it's kind of hard to figure out.
Yeah. So it's a manuscript. And so it's like a book.
Yes.
Right. And it's 9.3 inches by 6.4 inches by 2 inches, right?
So
it's 2 inches thick.
So it's 2 inches thick.
Yeah, so not a big book though. I mean,
No.
it's like
Not a huge book.
it's not like one of those massive things you think about from like
Which
2
is
by
silly
3 feet.
because you look at the pictures and they look really big.
They do.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
kind of blown up, but it's a little book.
But it's hundreds of vellum pages, and vellum's pretty thin paper material. It's kind of see-through almost a little bit too. So it's possible for there to be a lot of pages in a small amount of space, i.e. like old books, old Bibles, things like that. You see it on paper like that.
Paper's valuable, so you gotta use as much of it as possible.
Yeah, and make it as condensed as possible. So they're collected into 18 what are called quires, which are those little folded areas, right? We
It's like this, you know, when you look at a traditionally bound book, you know, if you look at it from the top, you notice that
You
it's,
have the
it's
little
in sections.
sections.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and those are folded over and stitched together, and then stitched together into one big book.
Yeah, those are the
yeah.
quires, right?
Yeah.
Each one of those.
Each one of those sections.
Yeah, so depending on how some of the pages are folded or things like that, or how you count them, I guess, it's about 240 pages in total. There's some numbering in the right-hand corners of the right-hand pages, which pretty much everybody agrees was done by somebody who owned it.
So this is one of those people who, after the fact, owned the book.
Yeah,
and
it
wrote
wasn't
in
done by the person who did it, but who was kind of maybe archiving it. You know, they owned it. They were like, okay, we should probably number these pages.
It might be they kept dropping the book and all the quires would fall apart. You didn't know what order to put them in, you know?
Yeah.
So he started numbering them.
Yeah, so they are numbered 1 through 116, but there's some number gaps, so people think that it's probably more like 272 pages originally altogether.
Yeah, because there are missing pages, and we don't know what's supposed to be on them.
Right. And then Wilfrid Voynich, as we mentioned before, acquired the manuscript in 1912. And there's a lot of strong evidence that all the different quires have been kind of reordered.
So people
Throughout
kept
time.
rearranging it the way they thought it should go. Is that am I
Yeah.
understanding how that's correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
okay.
mean, you know, again, you know, you drop a book and you're like, I don't remember
Yeah.
where everything goes. I'm just going to shove it back in, you
Yeah,
know.
it's been around for so long. It's quite possible it's been rebound
Yeah.
several times and kind of fallen apart. So, you know, interestingly, you know, if there's missing stuff, you know, and since it used to be in the hands of the Pope, it'd be kind of cool to go through the Vatican's all their archives and see if the missing pages are there. Even though-
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
interesting.
We'll have to
It
send a
might
letter
be.
to the Vatican. Dear Vatican, this is the Sideways podcast. I'm sure you've heard of us.
Surely,
Yeah.
we're Pope Francis's favorite podcast.
Yeah.
Clearly.
So, anyways, back to the story.
Oh, sorry.
So, based on modern analysis, we pretty much know that it was written by figure outlines and then colored paint, kind of like watercolor colored paint.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of watercolor.
Was applied to the figures, and the book has been carbon dated to the early 15th century, so the early 1400s. So that kind of corresponds with what we were talking about with the history of it as well.
Okay, so I'm sure you guys want to know about the text itself. So, it's clearly written from left to right, and so it's got a pretty straight left margin and a kind of a ragged right margin, which is what is to be expected. So that gives means it's probably more likely European than Semitic in origin. Some of the longer sections are broken into paragraphs, and some of them actually have bullet points. They're shaped like stars or flowers, and there's no punctuation. And I've noticed this myself going through the text. It's like there's no obvious punctuation in there unless certain characters represent a period, but then we'd be seeing them consistently, and I'm not seeing that pattern. There's no indications of errors or corrections, so there's no words that have been crossed out. There's no, you know how you do that little thing where you write the word above and there's a little V up pointing up to, to where it's
Yeah.
supposed to go. None of that. None of that going on.
And for as long as this text is, that's amazing.
It
that
is
there
amazing.
no
Yeah.
correction.
But I feel like it happened a lot in those days, but you just like wrote it and rewrote it. You used the paper as like, good, right? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know how quickly vellum absorbs ink either, but but from looking
Modern
at
vellum sucks ink in pretty quickly.
as I say,
Now I don't know about 400 years ago how it was,
Yeah,
but I know that
yeah.
it pulls it in pretty quick.
Yeah, the old timey stuff. I was just wondering if the ink takes a while to soak in, and if you have a moment to wipe it off if you make a mistake and then rewrite it.
You might be able to blot it up.
But I think,
you would see that. You'd see the
Yeah.
evidence of
you
that
would.
stuff,
And
yeah.
books back then were all handwritten.
Yeah.
They didn't have the printing press or
Right.
anything. And I think often you see books that didn't have, I mean, some of them did have mistakes in them, but some of them didn't. And I think that's one of the intriguing things about this manuscript is that it, assuming that it is a real text, it maybe suggests that there are other versions of it, or there were other versions.
Yeah, I was going to say, to have written it enough times that you didn't make any errors anymore. Back in the day when monks would write the Bibles and they would each just sit down and make the same page over and over and over,
Yep.
you had to write that thing a lot of times
But
to
here's
get
what
it
I'll
right.
tell you is that having a job in which I often write the same thing over and over and over again, it's always like the 50th time that you make a mistake, right? It's never like the first time because you're like on it. You're like, I
You're
gotta
really
do
paying
this the
attention.
right way. You're really paying attention, and then it's like after you feel like you've written enough times that you like have it is when you make the mistakes.
You get comfortable.
Yeah, you get
Yeah.
comfortable.
That's why you
So,
gotta do the old cut and paste.
yeah.
That's what I do in my job. A lot of boilerplate in my reports.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, back to the text.
Sorry.
Yeah. No,
Tangent.
that's okay. That's okay. I do it to you all the time, so no worries. So anyway, no indications of errors or corrections, and that might be significant. I'll talk about that later, but I'll hold you all suspense for now. We're going to talk about that after the commercial. Yeah. So there are over 170,000 letters in this text. They call them lists. And there are 35,000 words of varying length in there, from a couple of letters to about 10. They're very simple pen strokes for the most part. So the words seem to follow like a phonological or orthographic law. This is linguistic stuff that I have a hazy understanding of. Meaning that certain characters appear in each word, like vowels, for example. You can't write an English letter without a word without a vowel. So some vowels are going to just have to be there. Some characters never follow others. Some always follow others. There's been a couple that I've noticed just from perusing the text that always seem to go together. There's
Like a Q and a U.
Q and a U, exactly. In this text, there are two letters, and they might just be a single character, too, but it looks like an L and an F, and they always follow each other. And so it probably is, or it could just be a single character, I don't know. But so...
The characters seem fairly simple, though. I think,
Yeah.
right? There's two
Yeah, they're not
strokes at the most.
ornate.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
not at
they
all.
they are in one way, but in not another way.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, characters. Some characters always follow. Some characters never follow other characters. Some can be doubled or tripled even, but others not. Some words only occur in certain sections, and some occur throughout the manuscript. And I've noticed this too, even though I haven't read the whole thing. I've sort of hopped around a little bit and looked at various pages, and I've noticed some words that appear a lot in some sections and not in others. So, and that maybe possibly has something to do with the subject matter of the section. I'm not really sure. There aren't a lot of repetitions among the labels that are attached to the illustrations themselves. Even though there's much repetition in the text itself, there's not in the labels.
Which suggests that they're actually labels.
Oh, probably.
Yeah. So, and as Joe was kind of saying, there are different sections. There are actually 6 different sections.
And this is what we've defined it as 6 sections.
Yeah, they're fair. I think, as Joe was saying, they are fairly distinct, at least with the illustrations. And I think that's, the one thing that we can kind of know about this manuscript is we don't know what the words say, anything like that, but we can look and say, oh, the drawings in this kind of group are all the same, so we're going to say this is a section. So the 6 sections, there's an herbal section that has drawings of plants, most of which are like really unidentifiable or kind of almost like impressionistic drawings of.
And do you say that because of the coloring, the way that
It's not
the
just
colors
the coloring,
are applied?
but that they're also kind of
Stylized?
abstract. Yeah, stylized. I think is probably the best word.
Okay.
Or it could be that they were drawn by somebody who couldn't draw.
Who couldn't draw?
Yeah,
Which
they are-
would be interesting because it would mean there were multiple artists because some of the other drawings are like really
Some are
good.
good, yeah.
Really great. Then there's the astronomical section, which has illustrations of the sun, moon, stars, and zodiac symbols. The so-called biological section, which is kind of the most interesting and fascinating one because it's got some weird kind of anatomical drawings with small female human figures populating systems of tubes and transporting green liquid from place to place.
Yeah, some
They also have a lot
weird.
of Christian symbology mixed in with them, and they look really European. And then we have the things that are kind of they're so far they're unexplained. To me, it looks a lot like video game maps. Right? Like different worlds in a video game map, and they're like there's bridges in between some of them, but not others, and they're all kind of circular and weird. I don't know. That's just what it looks like to me. There's the pharmaceutical section, which it's called that because it has drawings of containers, which often have small plant parts like leaves or roots next to the containers. And recipe section, which consists mostly of like lots of short paragraphs that have like weird star drawings in the margin. So it's definitely worth the time to go out and take a look at the pictures.
Indeed, and they're fascinating. I think we might have mentioned this already, but they believe that the color was added to
Later.
the illustrations later on.
Yeah.
And the research points out that they believe that they only had four colors available. So every time there's a blue, it's the same blue, whether it's thinner or stronger to make it lighter or darker, but it's always the same blue or the same green. So they didn't have a whole lot of colors available, which makes sense because you had to mix color by hand at that point.
You
had to
crush
find
the same berries.
exactly,
Yeah.
and it's not easy to make. So you use all of it, and you just make as much as you need.
You know what? One of the things about the drawings and everything that kind of makes me wonder is that, as you know, paper was probably pretty scarce back in those days. I sort of wonder if somebody was like making these sketches. Somebody else came along and needed some paper to write on, and just basically wrote around these drawings, but it was completely unrelated. And then somebody else came along later and did a little coloring, treated them like coloring books.
I mean, it's always possible.
Yeah.
Anything's possible when it comes to the Voynich manuscript.
It really is.
And that's one of the, just as an aside, we talked about the history before, but it's amazing how long people have been puzzling over this thing. Some of the people that like Mr. Marcy that we talked about earlier that wouldn't turn it over to, what's his name, Mr. Kirchner. He spent 20 years trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah,
Some people currently have spent longer.
Yeah, and it is perplexing. And the illustrations are interesting because typically there's one illustration per page. And as Joe was alluding to, it takes up the majority of the page. And if we look at the plant one specifically, it's typically the entire plant from root to tip. So it's maybe they have a flower drawn here or there that's kind of a highlight section, but most of it is just that one plant. And that's why people believe that the text is about those plants. Some of the other illustrations of the women that you were talking about before, a little more perplexing, I think is the word to use there.
Well,
as to what the heck they mean.
Really good explanation for that.
Yeah.
I know we're gonna get to.
Yes.
Yeah, we got to get to the theories later. Let's talk really fast going through this description period.
Yeah.
Because I know what people want to hear is all these jazzy, cool theories, and then they want us to solve this mystery.
Well, that, my friends, is kind of the basic description of the Voynich manuscript.
Again, I strongly encourage you to go look at pictures if you haven't already, or look at more pictures.
I'm sure they're doing it right now.
Because it's you can't describe it with words.
And it is worth it to find the sites that have A, lots of the images, and B, high quality versions, because if you look at them in, say, a news article, because there's been a lot of news articles about it lately, it doesn't do it justice.
Yeah.
It's when you get one of those ones that you can zoom in multiple times and really see the detail.
Yeah.
That's when it really kind of gets in. It's really intriguing at that point. Wait, this isn't just some crudely drawn thing. There's actually some decent detail in there. It's really interesting stuff. That, I mean, obviously we all puzzled over it, but it's really interesting nonetheless.
Yeah.
But it is that time, as always, where we go into everybody's favorite part, which is theories.
Yay!
And I've got the first theory.
Let's hear it.
So our very first theory is that the Voynich manuscript was written by Leonardo da Vinci in a private language.
None other than Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
Might as well start off with the top, work our way down from there.
I gotta say from the start though that Leo was a better artist.
Yes. Okay, so here's the thing. People think, the folks that subscribe to this theory, they believe that Da Vinci wrote this when he was a very young man, maybe a teenager or just starting his career, but he hadn't really developed his system of drawing. So this is very early on. So it's kind of, it would be like looking somebody who was in the Cubist movement, but looking at their early works when they were trying to figure out how to draw in a Cubist way. It's not as developed as the rest of his work.
You just art nerded out.
I did. I totally art nerded out. I can't help it. Da Vinci was known for writing in semi-coded ways. He made what is, you may have heard of mirror script.
Yeah.
And what it is that if you took a piece of writing and you held